Well, hello there. It's Jennifer Hough, and welcome to day 2, everyone. Jennifer Hough here. So looking forward to our conversation today. Oh my goodness. We had a good one yesterday, didn't we? So I wonder how you're doing with your homework. In fact, if you can actually post and let us know, just submit a comment and let us know how you're doing with your homework and how it went with the sticky notes. And even you can post a few pictures of how you put the sticky notes up all over your house. Would love to see. And let's see, what else can we share right now? Well, today is a really important day, but I'll get into that in a second as everybody starts to join. Hi, everyone coming in from all over the world. If you can put your name in and where you're calling in from and all that kind of stuff, that would be fabulous. And we will get started. Let's start with your word of the day. Why don't you write down in the comment field the words that most represent how it went with being vigilant for what works. How did it go with being vigilant for what works? What's your word with respect to that? Were you vigilant for the light? Were you vigilant for what actually helped you? Just write in a few words about how that went for you, or, something happened and then you totally forgot because you let it take you out, which is also something to notice. I highly recommend that you go back and listen to this particular day 1, but we're on day 2 today. Day 2 is all about communication in times of great polarity. It's about finding the flow with your communication. So if you or someone is someone that, in fact, someone that gets triggered. There are symptoms that you don't communicate in the flow. I'm going to share something today that usually I only share with our flight school peeps or with our wings people. Those are sort of the advanced participants we have. Everything, every communication, every way that you act, every way that you are in the world is either in the spirit of zeros or ones. I just keep it really simple. It's like a computer, zeros and ones, right? It's like binary. If you imagine that your communication is either in survival mode from a place of lack, scared that you're not going to get what you want, or scared that you're going to get a reaction from the past, or 1, so the zeros are that, it's like survival. Some people are really good at surviving, so they're just surviving better, but it still isn't thriving. So what does thriving look like? It looks like someone who elicits inspiration, someone who causes people to listen, someone who causes people to feel like they're profoundly heard. So I'm going to give you some symptoms of being in 0 instead of 1, being in that survival operating system in your communication. Now, most people have a little bit of survival and a little bit of, they have both. They thrive sometimes. It depends on what it's about. It depends on how important that person is in their life. Or most people are like 75% in survival and maybe 25% in thriving. Let me show you why. So I'm going to give you the symptoms. See if you can do a few check marks. Okay. Where do I fit in all of this? How do I fit? And so it's like a Cosmo quiz, people. Okay. So we're going to do a little quiz and see where you fit, how many zeros you have and how many ones you have. So we're going to do the quiz for, first of all, survival communication. See if you do this ever. Okay. And what percentage of the time you do this. So the first question is, if you are someone that does not create flow, cause flow, or be in the flow in communication, you will tend to trigger people sometimes. Okay. You will tend to trigger your children. You'll trigger the people around you. Triggering means that you cause them to be a little bit reactive. Okay. So that's one symptom that you're in survival communication. Okay. All right. Second one is, you tend, when someone says what they say, you can tend to take things personally sometimes. Like if it's something about your house or something about the kids, or you have a hard time hearing what you perceive as criticism, and sometimes you might even feel like you're criticized a lot. So the next one is sometimes you'll withdraw or you'll avoid what you perceive as confrontation. Okay, see if you fit into that little box. Sometimes you avoid confrontation. Do you try to avoid hard conversations? Okay, so the next one is you get tired or you kind of bow out of when you can't find a way to have the communication that you want, you sort of bow out, you get tired, you get exhausted, you put your hands up, whatever the case may be. A third symptom that you might often have survival of communication. Let me just share with you why you don't want this. Because, well, I shouldn't tell you what you want, but why you might not want this. I know for sure I don't want this. In times of great change, people are stressed out. You're also sometimes feeling the stress of the world, right? We feel the stress of the world sometimes. And when we have people that are stressed or when we're stressed ourselves, what happens is we tend to be reactive. We tend not to lead a conversation to an inspirational place. We tend to spout opinion. That's another, by the way, symptom of someone that's in survival mode. We give our opinion. And what happens then is people can't find, and now I'm going to use another terminology that is so crucial to this discussion today. We are either in polarity, so we're either in dog eat dog polarity, right? Two sides, left and right, man and woman, right and wrong, good and evil. Or we're wanting to create a third entity. And the third entity, oh, look at me. Look at the mascara marks. So the third entity is a conversation whereby it doesn't matter if one person's polarized and the other person's polarized. The third entity is something that where both people can come into their hearts, both people can find agreement, both people can find inspiration. It's a leadership style of communication. When I describe how this form of communication works, I don't think I've ever met anyone that wants to go back to creating more polarity. Who doesn't want to create solutions that all people win from? So remember, in this style of communication, there's either being right or finding the flow. Those are that's zeros or ones. Being right, finding the flow. The mission in flow-based communication is that you're always looking for the third entity where you're asking questions, where everyone can asking questions or finding solutions where everybody would be willing to go, and it transcends the idea of polarity. Okay, it transcends the idea of polarity or of people fighting. So I'm going to give you an example. Okay, so an example of this is I remember with my stepdaughter, she was going through a really tough time. And I remember her saying, like, one day it would be, I love my dad and I hate my mom. And the next day it would be, I love my mom and I hate my dad. It was always that dualistic mom against the dad thing. And I was always like the auntie with the loving ears, just giving a listen. And so she was always in who's right and who's wrong, depending on who was agreeing with her side. And she said to me, I don't know how to resolve this because I feel like a ping pong. And I said to her, sweetie pie, what if they're not here to please you? You're actually here to lead them and to brighten their lives. And she just stood back and went, what are you talking about? I said, what if you're waiting for both of those people to be something for you? And what if there's a whole other reason why you're in their life and that you have some wisdom to share. And then, in fact, your job is to assist them to relax. What if your job is to let them actually play with you and co-create with you rather than constantly trying to please you? Because you're constantly playing the are they pleasing me game with them and they're enrolled in it. What if you led them to a new place? And she said, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. That, my friends, is communication for flow. It's transcending the communication she was doing, which was always playing the do you accept me, do you love me, and are you making me happy game. And I said, as long as you're playing that game, someone's going to make you unhappy. How about you play the I'm going to see how I can inspire my parents game. I'm going to see how good I can make them feel about their parenting. I'm going to see how much I can uplift them and bridge them out of the game they're playing. So all of a sudden, of course, everything changed and she found her way home, right? And from then on, the relationship was completely different. Now imagine if the world was that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 skills that will assist you to actually communicate such that you can build bridges just like a 17-year-old did. And if a 17-year-old can do it, so can you. Okay. All right. So we're going to be we'll be about 12 minutes from now. We will finish up. We will then be giving you some homework. What? Some homework. Oh, was that kind of squeaky? It was, wasn't it? Remember, this form of communication will work on your dog, but it will not work on your cat. It will work on all children. It will work with spouses. It will work with governments. It will work with all of that. But you need to keep some things in mind, which we will talk about. The things we need to keep in mind is sometimes no communication is the right thing to do, but you have to determine that once first. And then if communication is appropriate, then we're going to talk about the 3 ways you could talk. Because sometimes, well, we'll talk about that in a second. It's one of my favorite things to talk about because so many people communicate and there's a way of figuring out whether communication or saying something is even appropriate. Okay. All right. Is there anything else? I don't think so. So remember, I'm going to reiterate. You're either in 0 or 1. Going to give you some examples again. You're either leading the conversation to compassion and understanding, or you're a victim of the volatility or the opinions. So 0 or 1 or 0, right? Like you're either leading or you're a victim of the conversation, meaning you withdraw, you react, all of those things are victimhood. You are either engaging or co-creating solutions, or you are trying to convince or cajole. So you're either engaging in a conversation and co-creating, or you're convincing or cajoling. 0s or 1s. Okay. There's no in between here. You're either committed to creating something that everyone has a path to be able to win, or you are actually letting whatever righteousness win. Okay. So the 3rd piece is you're either in compassion and willingness to find an answer. Okay. You're either in compassion and willingness to find an answer, or you're in resistance, controlling, and triggering. That's it. You're either in compassion, curiosity, and willingness, or you're in resistance to the conversation and triggering. Okay, so what are the ingredients necessary? So these aren't the skills yet, but there are 3 ingredients necessary before we get to the 3 skills before you can even have a conversation. For some of you, these 3 ingredients, once you realize what they are and you realize that you never ask yourself these questions, it's you will realize you are having conversations you should never have. That alone will save your life. Woo! All right. Okay, so here we go. The first one, the first ingredient, the first necessity to figure out whether you should be in communication or not is it being asked for? Okay, is it being asked for? Let me tell you the 3 questions I asked. I ask when I'm in a conversation with someone else. I say, listen, do you want me to hear what you're saying and just listen? Or I've got 3 options. Do you want me to hear what you're saying and just listen? Do you want me to hear what you're saying and actually participate so we can come to solutions? Or do you want to just react and get it out of you? Or are you just processing out loud? I want to find where the other person is coming from, because if they just want to say something out loud and some people just process out loud and they need to barf something. If they're that, then you don't even need to have a conversation. You could just say, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. Does it feel better now that you got that out of you? Right? Do you want me to just listen? Okay. Or do you want to actually have a conversation that leads? See, it's just such a simple thing to say. And then you find out. Okay, second parameter. Okay, so you need to know if a conversation is even open to be had. And that is super important. All right, so the next piece is there some vested interest? In other words, this happens a lot with people in communication where it does not flow. A subject that they're talking about is triggering you, it's upsetting you, or you find yourself being triggered by the other person being upset. You don't like seeing other people upset. And what happens with people like that is they want to fix the conversation. Fixing the conversation is not what the person is asking for. You go back to the 3 questions I said before. The 3 questions are, hey, do you want me to just see? It'll change your mindset too. Do you want me to just listen to you? And do you want me to just like be here and be a listening board? Do you want to be able to just process something out loud, or do you want a conversation that leads to solutions, right? That's what we want. And so if they want a conversation that leads to solutions, your job is not to fix their upset. They didn't ask you to fix their upset. They asked you to be engaged in a conversation and curiosity for solutions. So your discomfort with their upset is not a good reason to have a conversation to try to fix them, because that's how they will feel. And when people feel like they're being fixed, it feels a little bit condescending to some. And to others, it feels like they don't have the capacity to find their own solutions. So it feels like you are, you're basically taking their power away by trying to fix, it's okay when people are upset. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so you have to somehow be curious on the adventure and allow someone they're upset if they're a little bit polarized, and don't try to fix it. Just listen with compassion. Okay. The third thing you need to do for an ingredient, so you need to be neutral. So first ingredient, you need to know that the person wants to have a conversation. Second ingredient, you need to be neutral. And if you can't be neutral, you shouldn't be having the conversation. Okay. If you feel so upset by someone else's upset that you're trying to fix their upset rather than have the conversation and curiosity, then there's no point. Okay. So the third ingredient that must be there is there must be space and time. So if there is not space and time to have a meaningful conversation, then one must renegotiate. Okay, one must renegotiate. If it's just if it's not going to happen, there's a meeting happening in 2 minutes, then you must agree to kind of table the discussion. Or if, so-and-so has to go to soccer practice and you're having a discussion with the little one, I promise you, one or both of you are going to leave upset. So it's like, sweetie pie, so you always leave the other person feeling good. Listen, I love you very much. Let's come back to this, and away we go. Okay, let's come back to this when you get back from soccer practice. Okay. And so, or if you're on the line with a friend and it's just not space and time, you say, listen, sweetie pie, let's have this conversation, but I want to honor it with enough time. I want to give it enough breathing space. I want to think about it. I want to get into my right place. And then let's have a conversation that's curious on the adventure of where we find the common ground and where we find the win-win. See what I'm saying? Okay. Hopefully this is helping. Is this ringing any bells? Is it good? Yeah. So, all right. So now we're going to talk about the 3 skills. Now, I'm going to surprise you because the first skill is skill number 1. Figure out if there's even a conversation to be had. That's skill number 1. Figure out if there's even a conversation to be had, that there's space, that you're neutral, and that they actually want to have a discussion that leads to some sort of higher understanding or greater compassion for each other, or even a solution. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second, once you've discovered that there is even a conversation to be had, so I call them, in my relationship, I call them, well, we both call them, I'm not going to say I call them because we both use them. They're sort of like guidelines for good communication. So this works whether you're in a grocery store and someone is stealing your toilet paper. It also works in your relationship, and it works with your kids, and it works with everyone. It's like, listen, I just want to make sure you understand how I communicate about stuff. All right. This is how I communicate. What I'm going to do is I want to hear what you have to say. And then I'm going to repeat back to you by saying, is this what you're saying? And then I'm going to say, thank you so much. Is there anything more? And they get to share anything more. And my job is to listen with neutrality. So the second skill involves actually making sure that the other person is heard, because I promise you, most reactivity occurs when the other person doesn't feel heard. And the cool thing is, by repeating it back to them, anyone, this works so great. They go, oh my God, this person really heard me. And sometimes they hear what they say and they're like, well, actually, you know what? Now that you repeat it back to me that way, maybe it's not exactly that. And I don't believe exactly that. I'm just really, really upset. It's amazing what happens just with this skill alone, being able to make sure the other person feels heard. No matter how triggered your ego is or how upset inside you just want to be right and all that kind of stuff, feed it back to them and make sure they feel understood, because then there is space for a conversation. Right? You just left space. They feel heard. So the final skill set is around being able to make way for deeper conversation. I always ask questions. The questions go something like this. Are you open to a point of view that might be a little bit different? Are you open to a perspective that you may not agree with, but maybe we can find some common ground? Because you're stating where you want to head with it. Do you see? So it's extremely powerful. Asking a question that points to the direction you want to get to, which is common ground, a solution, mutual understanding, compassion, whatever you think is possible in that conversation. Okay, and so these are the skill sets. And by the way, you want to appreciate the other. So you finish it with appreciating the person. Okay. You want to make sure that you acknowledge them for having the conversation. You want to be okay, finally, with that maybe you're incomplete at the end, but it's okay and you can bring it up later. And that the most important thing is that you had the conversation and that you sought to understand each other, even if you're not all the way there yet. So for those of you that freak out when things are not finding their common ground or finding peace, you have to get over it. All right, you guys. So your homework is sticky note. How do I let love win in this conversation? How do I let love win? Sticky note, heart-shaped sticky note. How do I let love win? That is your homework. 20 sticky notes all over your house. You can do it. I will be having a conversation like this later with someone I love. So it's not Adam, don't worry. April 19th, that is tomorrow, we are talking about how to bring that future that we imagine could happen. We just had the most amazing, the graduates of one of our programs called Flight School, had a great conversation about what the future of humanity looks like. And answering that question, is it possible that life could change going forward based on what we're going through right now, based on the polarity that's happening right now? It is totally possible, but without doing what we talk about tomorrow, it is not possible. So in order to get to where we need to, where we're being asked to get to for humanity, with that, finding that place where we again can be quiet, finding that place where we can be a society that actually gets along together without the duality, without the polarity, without the fighting. There is a way of co-creating it. There's a platform, there's an operating system for that. But if you don't engage that, you will go right back to the way things were. We as a society will, but it starts with each of us individually. As each of us individually find our way home to flow and mutually honoring communication and understanding the operating system that allows us to have a future that's different while we're being catalyzed in these times of great change. Voila. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow, 3:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I love you guys. Can't wait to hear about your homework. Bye for now. Bye, everyone.